If your day is filled with putting out fires and jumping from crisis to crisis, you're not alone. But here's the truth, that reactive cycle is not a sign of high performance. It is somewhat of a warning light for you. So, if you are new to me and this series, I started a series yesterday on burnout-proof leadership, and we talked about what kind of the foundational elements of burnout, like what it is, how it's defined, what it looks like. And I would say the key takeaway from the first video is burnout is a systemic issue, right? It's not just personal. It is a result of our environment and the culture that we create within our organizations. Um, for example, there was a time when I was still working full time, and me as a and just as an individual, but even as a leader, I am very proactive in my approach to things. So I want to I'm very structured and process centered. So I like to create systems and processes and organize things in a way to make them flow easy, right? To be efficient. I don't like to have to be at the last minute pulling things together. While I can do that and yeah, manage it well, even when those things happen, I like to then go back, okay, and analyze and say, okay, what can I put into place so that this doesn't happen again, so that I can be much more proactive. However, when I was working full time, I had a manager who was more reactive, more of a firefighter, if you will. That's kind of the way I described it. She was a firefighter, and I was more like Smokey the Bear, right? Like, let's prevent, you too can prevent forest fires, you too, right? And it was very challenging for me because of how I am naturally when we were constantly having to address things that could have been avoided, right? And it was extremely stressful for me and the rest of the team. We were constantly scrambling. Mistakes would end up being made because we were at the last minute doing things. And when you are operating like that as a leader, you are being very reactive. So that looks like constant problem solving, high stress, very little strategy, having unclear priorities, and your team goals are just not aligned with the overarching team, department, organization goals. Or, everyone kind of has their own thing because no one really knows what's most important. Here's how you can identify that. What are some of the symptoms? What to look for? This is missed deadlines, poor communication, maybe even some low morale. And while, yes, reacting to problems is necessary, but you don't have to live there. Living there is an option, right? You get to make a decision. You get to choose whether you are going to be proactive or reactive. And there's some costs that you have to pay if you if you decide to stay in a place of reactivity. What ends up happening because you are in a place of reactivity, you and your team are not going to be able to be as creative and innovative as possible because you're in this place of constant pressure, constant stress. It just has to get done. And so it's just the quickest, fastest, leanest way to get things done versus being able to take the time to really strategize and allow the creativity to flow, allow the innovation to flow so that you can actually perhaps get things done more efficient, more efficiently, have greater impact with the things that you're getting done. Another cost is an increase in turnover with your team. People don't like to stay in environments where they are high stress, high pressure all the time. No one likes that. Heck, I left that type of environment multiple times in my career because it's just too, you can only manage that for so long before it takes a toll on you physically, emotionally, and mentally. So if you don't do something to shift that reactivity, shift the culture, the way that you're leading, you're going to end up having a high staff turnover. That means that it's costing you money because now you're having to spend time and resources to recruit, hire, onboard, train someone new. Not only that, you're losing that institutional knowledge because people are going out of the door with information that may not have been passed down. Um, Another cost is just fatigue. And, as a leader, you end up feeling fatigued and experience decision burnout. Because if everything is a fire that needs to be put out, you're constantly in that reactive decision-making mode. You're having to make decisions under stress and strain. And that does not necessarily lend itself. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to good decision making. And again, it's just draining on you. And finally, another cost is you can compromise the impact of your mission. Right? If you are not being intentional with how you manage your team, how you manage projects and tasks, if there's no systems, structures, processes in place, or not enough systems and processes in place, or maybe sometimes we as leaders can be the bottleneck as well because we require our team members to come to us for everything. We make every single decision we have to make. We don't empower them to make decisions on their own. And so as a result, we end up becoming the bottleneck and slowing things down. And all of those things can compromise the impact that you're able to make as an organization. Right? Um, so how do you make the shift? What does that look like to make the shift from being a reactive leader into being a proactive leader? And I have a framework for you. It's four parts. Step one is clarity over chaos. This means that you are going to reestablish what the vision is for your team, for your department, for your organization, depending upon what your role is, and then set aligned goals to that vision. Not only that, you're going to communicate that to all members of your team and share with them how their specific role ties back into the overarching goals and vision of the organization. This is going to provide structure for your team members to operate in. Not only that, it's going to provide structure for you because now you're even more clear on what you should be focusing on as a leader in order to drive things forward. Step number 2, that is empowerment over micromanagement. You're gonna have to delegate. You're just gonna have to do it. You're going to have to delegate to your team members and trust that they will get it done. Now, I can already hear you all groaning like, well, but Trasetta, I've tried delegating in the past and it has never turned out well. I get it. I was not the best at delegating when I first started doing it. In fact, I did it once or twice and then I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. But what I found was I was overloaded because I was trying to do all the things. Once I found a system that really worked, that made delegation. Yes, it does take a little bit more work on the front end, more time on the front end, but it frees you up in the future when you make that investment in time. Not only that, it allows you to grow and develop your team members so they can become even greater assets to your team and your organization as a whole, right? So here, and I'll give you a real quick snippet of what that delegation framework looks like. First, you want to identify what is a task that you regularly do that could be done by someone else, meaning like it doesn't absolutely have to be done by you. Once you've identified the task, take a look at who on your team has the skill set to be able to carry out that task. That doesn't mean you don't have to do any training or instruction with them. That just means they have the raw skill, the raw talent to be able to carry out the task. Third, you're going to actually delegate the task to the individual and share with them what your definition of done is. Be very clear and specific about what that end product looks like. For example, Jane, I'd like for you to draft this month's financial report. The report should be here is a template. The report should be X number of pages long. It should include these data points. And I'd like you to have it to me by Friday at noon so that I can review it and make any necessary changes if necessary before I have to submit it to our CEO on Monday by 5 p.m. Right? That gives very clear direction. You might even provide them with some samples of previous reports that they can review and use as a guide for carrying that out. Not only that, before you close out the conversation, you want to say to them, let's touch base on Wednesday before you leave so that we can so I can see where you are if you're having any difficulties or if you need any support, right? That is how you properly delegate and recognize they are not going to get it absolutely perfect. Very rarely will someone get it perfect on that first go around, but they will be able to get it done probably 70-80% of what you would have done yourself. And then you can but fine tune that along the way till it gets to the place where what they're producing is at the same level or quality of what you would typically do, right? So that is how you empower, right? We're not micromanaging here. Step 3 is to create systems, right? Create systems. We don't want stress, systems over stress. So that means that you are going to create some workflows that start to anticipate the needs ahead. Here's an example. Remember, I told you that I had a supervisor who was very reactive. And what I found when I first started working for her, she would regularly have these meetings with potential partners. And she always wanted a folder to give them with information about our programs. And what I did, and it would be just a few minutes before her meeting, or she would have to leave for the meeting, that she would ask for for me to put together these packets for her. Well, what I started doing was, after a few times of having to scramble to pull that stuff together, I went ahead and created 10 packets that I could just keep in my desk with all the things that she might want. And then all I had to do when she would request one is pull out the documents that didn't really align with the particular meeting that she was having, right? That was a way that I anticipated her needs to make my life a little bit easier, right? That's a very, very simple example, but you can also create some workflows. You can create some processes within your team, within your organization that help to create that same type of anticipation of the needs ahead so that you are in much more of a proactive stance rather than having to be reactionary. And then the final step 4, is we want to coach rather than command, right? When we are working with our team members, we want to develop a leadership style that is more like coaching. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I first was promoted into a supervisory manager role, I was very authoritarian. I was very much the commander. You go do this. It was my way or the highway. What I say goes. It was very much that. I would tell you what to do. Now, over time, now I'm at this place where I take on more of a role of a coach. And so that means I allow my team members to share with me what they're working on, where they need support, and what they need, what they might need from me, what resources they need, how long they think it's going to take them to complete things. And then I interject if they have, if there's still something that I want to, check in with them about, then I'll bring that to them. And after they've gone through and shared with me the things that they do. So now it's the place of I'm coaching them through whatever they're working on versus me telling them what to do. Um, a really great tool that I started using with my last team was, and when they would come to me when I was first promoted into assistant director role, when they would come to me with questions about things, they needed a decision to be made or they were kind of stuck or needed some support, rather than me just telling them what I wanted them to do based off of what they were asking me, I would turn the question around and be like, well, what would, how would you handle it? What would you do? And then they would share their thoughts. And I would say, okay, that sounds good. Why don't we make this adjustment? Or I might even say, that's perfect. Go and do that. What I was doing was teaching them how to think critically, as well as helping them to learn what I would probably do in that same scenario so that they could be empowered to make decisions on their own because their decisions would be usually in alignment with the way that I would make the same decision, right? So, those 4 steps again are clarity, right? We want to introduce clarity rather than chaos. We want to empower, not micromanage. We want to create systems so that we can avoid the stress, and we want to coach rather than command. So, how do you start to do this? There's a few things that I can, I've already shared with you a few things that I've done, but here's a couple more things that you can do in order to start implementing this more proactive leadership style. And one thing that I would like you to do is to do a weekly leadership audit. Take a look at ask yourself the question, where am I being reactive versus being proactive? Also, where am I spending my time and energy on things? Am I spending the majority of my time on things that are energizing, or am I spending my time on a lot of things that are draining? Those areas where you're spending time on things that are draining typically can be indicators of some areas where you need to create some processes, which, by the way, leads me into the second step that you can implement, or second thing you can implement in order to start this shift, is to um, identify one area from that list, right? Identify one area where you can create a repeatable process, right? Create some structure around that particular area to alleviate some of that reactivity. Sometimes you may not be able to create a robust process, but you can create a simple process and refine that over time as you figure out that, okay, this works, this didn't work. Oh, I missed this step in here, right? But just start with a simple process. Next, start to incorporate strategic check-ins with your weekly meetings with your team members, right? So this will look like asking, may just take five, depending upon the size of your team, 5 to 10 minutes of your weekly meetings to ask about what people are working on as it relates to the strategic initiatives to ensure that everyone is remaining aligned. This will help to identify where people are starting to drift away from their most important work. That can also help you to recognize where maybe some more processes need to be put into place. It can help you recognize where maybe you need some more support in a particular area. Maybe you need another team member, or one team member is overloaded where another team member has a little bit more capacity available to them. Doing these check-ins will really help you to have kind of audit where everyone is so that you can ensure that the most important work is being done. And then finally, put some time on your calendar, schedule it, proactive thinking time. This is time for you to strategize. Put at least an hour where you will sit down and take the time to do your energy audit and identify that area where you want to create a process and start the outlining of that process. Hey, take advantage of AI. Go log into Chat GPT and say, hey, this is my issue within my team or organization. Help me create a process around that. And that can be your framework, and you can start to adjust it based off of that kind of foundation that AI creates for you. So do me a favor, drop in the comments the hands up emoji if you are committed to shifting out of firefighting mode this week, right? Hit me with the hands up emoji. So just a real quick recap before I close out. We've been talking about how reactivity is not really effective, and it is proactive leadership that protects your mission and your team. Now, tomorrow, we're going to get into the 3 pillars of burnout-proof leadership. This is where strategy meets soul, right? So where strategy meets soul inside of your leadership. So I invite you to share this live stream with another leader that you think needs to hear this, and join me back here tomorrow, same time, same place, where we'll be talking about the 3 pillars of burnout-proof leadership. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.